All right, so I'm back. This morning I was rudely cut off with bad reception, but that actually works out great because there's a few things that I kind of skipped over that I wanted to make sure that I hit upon. So last that I left you, just as a quick recap, we're talking about hips and how the hips are going to affect down all the way the chain down to the knees, the ankles, the feet, as well as up the chain. We've been doing a lot of upper body acknowledgement over the last several weeks, talking about the shoulders, the neck, and so now we're working our way down. We're looking at functional, healthy, optimal hips. And so the last thing that I had left you with was a couple of standing movements, standing exercises, basically like most of us know as a squat or a bending to standing action. So we're going to pick up right from there and move on. So when I last left you, here's my leg friend again, we were just doing a real simple sit to stand action. Yeah, we talked about having balanced weight in the feet, balanced weight level in the hips, and having the weight over the ankles. And then we were working on just a real simple crease at the hips, bend at the knees, bend at the ankles into a seated position. Starting at a high range first and then eventually working our way lower. We want to make sure that those knees track in the general direction over those second toes, that we've got good imprints through the soles of the feet. We're not gripping, clenching the toes. We're not collapsing the arches, collapsing the knees. So you've got good tracking going on in this plane. And you've got that good belly to back support, keeping that pelvis stable and the spine stable as you do these sit downs or these squats. And then we were just doing a simple rise from there. What that's going to look like in the bones, here we go. When we're sitting, we're getting that flexion at the ankle, flexion at the knee, and then we're getting this tilt in the pelvis, this neutral pelvis. So the sits bones are shining back and spreading, so allowing for your sits bones to spread. And then when you come back up and bring all those bones back into stacking, those sits bones are going straight down and they kind of narrow a little bit in the upright position. So you want to let the bones do that. You want to let there be a folding at the hips, a bending forward of the knees, and a bending kind of back of the ankles, so the heel is slipping back and getting nice and heavy into the floor, and then rising up from there. So it helps to see how the bones are doing what they're doing, and we're just going to allow them to do so. Now if we're doing that, the muscles are getting their right sort of balance as far as work, or stretch, stability, or mobility. Now, we did a little bit of weight shifting earlier too. So what that's going to look like with the arms forward, take your seated position. Make sure you've got this support always. It's really easy to dump. It's really easy to fall there. So lift up through the front of your hip bones without tucking. Just come to that nice balance, front and back, neutral pelvis. Let the arms hang in front of you. And then you're just going to simply shift your weight back to the heels and then forward towards the balls of the feet without clenching the feet or the toes. Shift back, which you'll feel a little change, more work towards the posterior side of the legs, and then forward, which takes you a little more into the quads. And back, and forward. What we're going to add to this is an adduction, an isometric squeezing in of the legs, and then an adduction, a pulling apart with the legs. So as you stay in the seated position, you can adduct, squeeze in, way up high from the upper inner thighs and all the way down to the insteps of the feet, and then pull apart. So now you can start to bring in the adduction and abduction that we talked about in the first video, and then pull apart. So that's going to add another challenge to the inner and outer edges of the legs. Come back to neutral, right over the ankles, and then rise up from there. Now if you want to get a little bit more of the quads in there, so that we're working on supporting more around the knees, you can do that with an elevation in the heels. So just let the heels rise up, nothing too high, Keep the weight right in the center of the balls of the feet, not too much to the big toes or too much out to the edges of the pinky toes. And you want to be right in that space, kind of between the first and second toe part of the ball of your foot. From there, you keep the elevation, and you're going to add the squat there, sitting down and back with the same idea, the same mechanics as we did earlier, and then rising up. As you come up, get a little extra squeeze at the glute fold hamstring connection. So you get nice extension through the front of your hips, so it completes the movement. You're going to sit down, sit back, try to keep the heels elevated, stabilizing the ankles, and then rising up from there. Finish the movement with that little bit of squeeze at the back. And I'll just do that with you one more time. Sit down, sit back. You can start to challenge it, going a little lower, a little lower. Yeah, hula dancers. And then coming up, and then coming to that final squeeze at the end. And this is the piece of the picture that a lot of us kind of miss out upon. You really want to lift up through the front of the hips and get that use of the back of your hips. And then lower the heels down. Whew. Okay, so now I want to show you guys how that would apply to sitting and how you can sit a little more efficiently while you're in class, at the office, traveling. A little hard in your car, but still you can be aware of a few of these things. So when you're sitting, if possible, you're trying to be in a chair where it can allow for your hips to be a little higher than your thighs and your knees. So you want to see a down slope coming from your hips down to your knees. If you're in too low of a chair, you end up in something like this, which is putting a lot of load into your sacrum and into your back. So if you can, you want to try to perch up. You can do that with just the right height of a chair, or there's some nice boosters that you can put under your hips in order to be there. As you can see in this chair and most chairs, they dip down as you go back. So if I sit all the way back, I'm more prone to slump and slouch. So if you ever see me at a restaurant or anywhere, I'm usually sitting forward, which looks a little geeky, but I don't care. You're going to sit way forward so it allows you to have this better position. So you can see right away, my pelvis is dropping into a better neutral position. I've got weight on the center of my sitting bones and equally on my sitting bones. Because again, sometimes we sit a little more like this. So it's good to check in. How are you sitting? How are you standing? Where do you tend to favor your weight? Start to become aware of those things. And then see if you can bring a little more balance into the mix, standing more equally weighted on your feet, standing a little more parallel, sitting a little more evenly, and not always sitting just in what's comfortable. Over time, sitting in the more upright optimal positions will actually feel comfortable and your body will start to crave it. So when you're going into that standing from the sitting position, we can apply what we just learned from our standing exercise. Now, you're going to want to not always just take those arms forward, but for now you're going to want to take the arms forward, do a little bit of a hinge at the hips, really get those sits bones to shine back, and then shift your weight over to the arches, take a light hover, and then stand up from there. To sit back down, go ahead into the bend, shift your weight back to the heels like you did in the previous exercise, and sit down. So you can use the chair as a way to help with that exercise, which might help you feel a little bit safer. But also think of this not just as an exercise, but as a way you can sit and stand from your chair. So you can lower, sit back. You don't have to be so formal about it, but you know what's going on as far as the placement of your pelvis, the engagement of your core body, the alignment of your legs, and the way you're holding your weight in your feet. Remembering to keep those feet open. With the feet, I'm really big on that. You want to use your feet kind of like you would give someone a high five. So you want your feet to feel open. So I call that the foot high five. You want to always have that going on in the feet to support everything that's going on up the chain. So that helps you to stand a lot more efficiently. Okay, so that's what I wanted to add on that I missed this morning. And then I'd like to leave you with just maybe 2 more exercises, which will probably turn into 4 more exercises, but we'll try to stick to 2. You'll have to come with me this way. All right, so you're gonna come onto your back for this one. And hopefully you can see. All right. So just settle the shoulders, settle the arms, let them rest into the floor. Feet are parallel hips distance. And we're gonna work first on getting that core set active, feeling the breath help you to bring the ribs in, belly in, and narrowing the hips. From there, pull the heels back towards your sits bones and keep your feet rooted and deepening down into the floor. From here, you're just gonna elevator your hips up to the sky, trying to get to that place where you can be straight through the hips. This might look familiar from my very first hip low back exercise. So you can refer back to that if you need to. But you're gonna go for lifting through the tops of your thighs here, and really squeezing through the lower glute hamstring. Now in this bridge position, we're gonna hold, and you're gonna work a side to side motion here. You're gonna push the lower part of your hips to the right, center, and left. Center. So you're just basically doing like a slide or like a typewriter action from one side to the other side without dipping or collapsing anywhere in the torso or the hips. So that's the first exercise once you're up in your bridge, just going side to side. From there, the next exercise is to go into rotation. So think about right where that glute and the hamstring meet again. From there, I want you to squeeze that hip up to the sky. You'll feel the other hip just slip down and then come back to neutral. And then squeeze the opposite side up towards the sky without throwing the ribs or the belly forward. Keep that settled and just let the opposite hip spill down and then come back to center. It's really tempting to do this from your back and from your sacrum. So like I said, focus way down here and work from there to press the one hip up, letting the other hip slip down, come back to center, and then the left hip up. The other hip slips down and center, just giving your spine some time to rotate, and that also puts some rotation into the sockets. The whole time, the heels are energetically pulling back to keep the hamstring active. To come down, you're gonna go ahead and just crease at the hips, neutral pelvis all the way down. All right, so those are the exercises that I want you to have for the floor. The standing exercise moves your body over your hips or over your leg bones, and that ground exercise helps to move your leg bones in the pelvis a little bit more. So you're kind of addressing that mobility in your hips from two different angles. You'll see the difference. That bottom, the ground stuff is a little bit more challenging in a little different way, but you're gonna feel that it's gonna bring a lot of strength to your hips, maybe some new space in the front of your hips while you're getting the strength in the back of your hips. And it will, over time, really start to support the knees better, the ankles and the feet. So like I had mentioned earlier, the tendency for us to get issues in the feet, such as plantar fasciitis, which is really common, actually needs to start being addressed way up high at the hips. So no matter, even if people come into me for plantar fasciitis, for their feet, I'm always going to start them up at the hips, up at the core body, getting that set, getting that into a good place. Once all of that starts to unravel and get the right strength that it needs, then the knees start to get better support, flexibility, or strength, and then the ankles and the feet. So you can see how that, starting here at the top of the chain, is going to be essential to us getting healthier knees and healthier ankles and feet. So stick with me, because we're going to do this probably over the next 3 weeks, taking it down the chain, addressing different muscle groups. And that's it for today. Aloha!